Right, so we're going to talk about inspections and negotiations. We're going to talk about how to prepare your buyer for success, how to protect your seller's purchase price before inspections ever begin. We're going to talk about what key and secondary inspections are and why time is important. We're going to talk about the different strategies involved in inspection negotiations. So as new agents, I want you to try not to get too excited when you get your first offer accepted or your first listing into escrow. And the reason for this is because that is just the beginning. There are two very key components that are typically the most important to the successful close of the sale. And that would be getting loan approval and a successful inspection negotiation, if there is even a negotiation. Sometimes there is no negotiation in inspection. If the property is new construction, the builder just has to fix it. There are no credits involved in new construction. Okay, it's just builder's warranty. Got a lawsuit from a buyer on a listing I had a couple of years ago because they said I failed to disclose that one of the parking spots was next to a trash area where they need to move their car once a week. I didn't know that. I showed you the parking spots. I didn't know there was any trash there. Like there's a trash chute in the building. Agents don't need to know what day trash day is and if the car needs to be moved, but that's weird.
They're suing you for.
They named me because I'm the agent. I think they're really trying to sue the seller. And I think the property was a rental property for them for a long time. So I don't know.
But what took them years to do?
So good. But you know, like the lawsuit's like, you knowingly, I didn't know shit. I would have told you. I told you like these parking spots are already weird. One of them's up against the wall. It's not an ideal situation. I'm not going to tell you that and not tell you something else, you know? In any case, sorry, I digress. I should look at my phone. So if there is an inspection negotiation, it would be done on a form called the RR, request for repair. And the seller would respond to it either on that same form if their response is simple, or if it's more complicated, an RRRR. This gets confusing, but this is my silly little way I remember. No, nobody likes an inspection request. Man, if the seller and buyer don't agree and the seller has to respond in a complicated way. That's how I remember 2 R's versus 3 R's. 4 R's, thank you. Now, if you're getting into multiple rounds of R's, you're probably not closing your deal. Let me tell you, a lot of inspection negotiation is done verbally between the agents. You're setting yourself up for massive failure if you're just throwing a laundry list together and sending it over. It's not going to be received well, even if everything on there is true. No seller wants to see this list, this massive request, right? So I'll talk to you about the strategy and setting it up and collaborating with your investor, the other agent, so that you are setting yourself up for better success. When you are making a request in relation to inspections, what can you ask for? You can ask for a repair. You can ask for credit or a reduction of purchase price or any combination thereof. We'll talk a little bit more about that and why you might be using one method over another later and why it may or may not be advantageous or even allowed. All right, so if you are a listing agent and you've taken my class, you know, get those seller disclosures up front, right? You also know to keep your eyes peeled. If you notice anything that looks amiss, you should probably advise your seller, let's get it checked out before we even go on the market. Let's get some accurate information. Let's set ourselves up for success. Let's know what's going on here. Let's get a number that we trust, because who knows if the buyer's inspector or whatever company they hire that comes in and finds a problem, if they're going to give us accurate numbers. We don't know that. Also, you know, do we want to go through all the work and the escrow if it ends up being something that makes it, you know, the home and puts it in a situation where it's unsellable, right? Seller, if we find a massive, you know, like repair that's necessary, like a retaining wall or foundation issue, something structural that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, like seller, where would this put you? You know, like, would you be able to close? Would you have enough proceeds left to actually close? Where does this put you for your future plans? Right? So this is if we know about or see massive problems. It's best for us to know so we can protect the situation and we can trust the information is accurate. Also, so that we can position the property appropriately and disclose those massive things up front. This is not something you tell a buyer after you accept an offer. A massive thing that you don't plan to correct prior to selling is something that would be disclosed prior to offer. And any documentation, report, estimates, all of that would be given as well. Even smaller things though. So for instance, in 20 years, I've had like 3 good fireplace inspections. There's always a massive amount of issues with any fireplace. Just is. I don't think California contractors are really held to a high standard of building them in a quality way because we don't really use them all that often, do we? It's more for a couple of hours with a glass of wine when you're feeling a little romantic or holiday time or have a formal dinner, like people over for dinner, right? We don't run these things the way other people do. And subsequently, the people who build them don't get called out on not doing the best job. I've had massive issues in brand new construction homes where things aren't built properly. So if I have a seller that has a fireplace, I will ask them, have you had it checked out anytime recently? And unless the answer is yes, and I have the report and it's perfect, or, you know, it's very minorly, you know, could use a few minor repairs, I say to them, even if they say to me, it's safe, it's fine, we use it, you know, like almost every night. Well, you may feel safe with it, but, you know, an inspector might come in and say something vastly different. So seller, listen to me here. We advertise the fireplace as decorative only. Not a single buyer on earth will not make an offer because of the fireplace being decorative or functional. However, if we don't advertise it that way and it is inspected, it may make your deal fall apart because they want this massive credit, right? And if we set it up to where we don't know the condition, no credit will be involved, you know, it's decorative only from the get-go, you're protecting your seller's purchase price. So all of my listings, unless I know for sure the chimneys are perfect, you will see that I have a disclaimer that fireplace is decorative only. Seller will not make any credits in relation to condition. Okay. Now, my one exception is fireplace chimneys can also be structural. I'm not, you know, like I'm not excluding fireplace use from structural issues. If it's causing a safety or structural issue to the house, any seller that works with me is going to hear the advice that that's not a fireplace operation issue. That's a structural issue, and that is something any buyer is going to be concerned with. So we should look at that one, even though we've told people that we're not going to give any credit in relation to this fireplace. And with the buyer, your buyer's agent, as soon as you start working with them, you're going to have the opportunity to get to know who they are, right? You're going to learn to speak their language. You're going to look at property. You're going to look at conditions, right? You'll hear things when you go to showings and open houses with them, like an agent saying the fireplace is decorative only. And I'll give them the same explanation I just gave you, is that I haven't seen many fireplaces that are ever operable. Sellers are not down to give some $25,000 credit for something that's not like a massive part of LA life. And, you know, expect that if the home you buy has a chimney, it's probably going to need a lot of repair. It's not going to be, probably not going to be, you know, functional. And sellers are very remiss to give credits in relation to the chimney. I set my buyers up to have realistic expectations, you know, like when, and I'm sure you'll hear this at some point, you know, I'll get a referral client or even a random client, but particularly bad with a referral client. You know, my friend said you got them a $27,000 credit. And I'm like, well, I did, but You shouldn't be thinking about credits. Don't you want your house to be like pass inspections and be perfect with flying color? I want you to have the best house there is. So I'm trying to retrain them to get off the fucking credit, get off the sales price. We're not about renegotiation. Let's get you the best house. Let's make sure we get you the best price we can on the front side, because it's fraud if we make an offer and we intend to beat that purchase price down. Sometimes it's the only way you're gonna get your foot in the door, particularly when you get into super high end, but it's definitely not something I want to do. It's not something you should do. And if it is your intention and it is your motivation, it is fraud. Okay, so we don't offer a price we don't intend to pay, because it hurts the seller to tie them up in escrow, right? We have no intention of purchasing that home at that price and we're trying to make things up or nitpick. We've hurt that seller by keeping them from being able to sell to a buyer, another buyer in that meantime, and adding days on market, and then the stigma of a canceled escrow, even though it was really just a jerk buyer and a jerk buyer agent, right?
It was not.
It was not me, yeah. It was not me. So I would just manage my buyers' expectations. A lot of them will be like, oh, well, we could ask for that and request for repair, right? And there's a slightly leaning fence on one part of the perimeter in the backyard. And I'm like, well, we tend to focus on major safety issues, major system issues that are unexpected. When it's stuff that we can see in cosmetic, we typically wouldn't ask for that. The reason for that is because the price of the home, the value of the home is reflecting its condition. We're not looking at brand new construction. If you'd like perfect, we can absolutely look at brand new construction, but for your criteria and where we're looking, that would probably put us in a price range of blank, right? So I'm reining them in from their unrealistic expectation that they're gonna get a perfect house and the seller's gonna repair everything. I mean, I've seen some ridiculous requests for repairs where you're asking for a tub stopper. Go to fucking Home Depot and get one. Listing agent or buyer's agent, don't be so lazy. Go give them a closing gift. Give them a nice Lowe's, like gift card. I mean, why on earth would you be stupid enough to give me a request for repair asking for a tub plug? Does that seem important?
No.
No. Yeah. Do you think it was to detract from the 37 other items that were on there? Probably. They're just like, add it all. At the end of the day, it is not up to us as agents. So that's why I start coaching my buyers as soon as I start working with them to have more realistic expectations and focus on the big things. And when it comes time to do it, my advice is let's focus on the big things. We're more likely to get the seller to agree to most or all of the important things because it's going to be important to any buyer. But if we start adding in all of these other things, they're more likely to receive it poorly and not want to work with us at all. I always ask my buyer to put on my seller hat and the seller to put on my buyer hat. Right? So I'm sorry, buyer, if this was your house and a buyer was asking you for a tub plug, would you want to give them anything? No, you would want to be like, get out of here, which is what we did. The answer is Megan Trainor, NO, 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 notice report. NTP 1, go.
But doesn't depend on the market if it's a buyer's market and buyer knows he can get away with everything.
I had backup offers.
Yeah.
I had backup offers and they wanted like 40K on a $600,000 house in NoHo. No, go. Even in the bad market, go. I don't take listings that I don't think are fairly priced anyway. So I'm always pretty confident that I'm going to be able to sell whatever I take. Yeah, I don't take long bets. Anyhow, so I just set my buyer up for realistic expectations and for success. I set my seller up for information and full disclosure and protecting their purchase price by positioning themselves properly and pricing appropriately, right? Because don't worry, there'll be things that we just don't know about and can't find that can be problematic enough on their own. So let's take the ones out of the equation that we can circumvent, right? Let's take care of everything we can. I don't know about you, but I really like to get paid for doing my job. I don't love to do it all and then for the deal to fall apart at the 11th hour once I've done everything. No need for that. All right, so let's talk now. So I talked to you about expectations, prepping seller prepping buyer, how to have those conversations with them, right? The general arguments that come up, well, this should all be perfect. No, that's called new construction. Let's add a 1 or let's add a 0 to your purchase price, right? Of course, I say it more nicely. So now, once you have an offer accepted, you open escrow. Whether you're the listing agent or the buyer's agent, technically it's the listing agent's responsibility to open an escrow. But as the buyer's agent, time is more important to me. I have more deadlines I need to meet. Also, my buyer has a loan, which most of them do. It is really important that escrow starts working with a mortgage broker or loan officer right away and get some fees so they can order an appraisal. A lot of things that happen depend on what escrow does in the first few days. And they don't always care about me because they're getting their business from a listing agent. So if I'm the buyer's agent, I make nice with escrow. I pick up the phone. I introduce myself. I introduce them to my client. I ask, we confirm the wire instructions. I also have this opening escrow template, whether I'm listing agent or buyer's agent. And it contains a section for every single piece of information escrow needs for me to do their job. And they probably think that bitch is super crazy and typing. But then I pick up the phone and I'm like, don't think I'm crazy. I did your job. I know what you need. That's why I put it all in one place so it's easy for you. But if you ever need help with anything or anything else, just let me know. Thank God for you. I don't know how you do it. Like that. And it's true. They have the hardest job. And yeah, those be so nice to your escrow officer, man. Be so nice. So yeah, I open escrow, but what's the very next thing I do? Yeah, I order inspections. I set them up. So I used to ask for, let me back up. Also in preparation for your buyer. You let them know it's very important that they're at inspections because what an inspector puts in their home inspection report can seem scary and rigid. When in actuality, in person, they'll be like, oh, that's a $2 washer. I just go to Home Depot and get it myself. Instead, the inspection report says, have a licensed plumber look at this to make a repair. That's what it says in the report versus what happens in reality. So I would say, look, buyer, it's gonna be super important that we make sure you're available for inspections. I will also be there. Same thing if you're a listing agent. You need to be there during inspections. Agents who are not at inspections, shame on you. Shame on you. It is the most difficult part of the negotiation and you're not there for it. How do you expect to give your client good advice if you weren't personally present? You can't. All right, so buyer, I'm probably not going to be able to control when the offer gets accepted, depending on how competitive it is. We might have to work with very tight time constraints or our investigation contingency. Also, we are subject to inspectors' availability. And don't get me wrong, I have 3 lovely inspectors, but I'd really like to have my first choice every single time. And if that means we have to wait an extra day or 2, I think it's worth it, but that's ultimately your choice, right? So buyer, I need you to be able to basically tell your work, tell whoever, whatever, I have to be at these inspections. And if not, I will be there. I will act like I'm a buyer. I will ask questions and I will video all of it. Okay? I will video all of it. And or if you're able to actually be on a video chat call, I'll have you on the phone while we walk around because the inspector will walk us around and talk about things. And whether you're a listing agent or a buyer's agent, it's really important that you ask questions for further information, right? So you'll see these gestures like, oh, like the inspector's clearly not worried about something, but they're not saying what. And so I'll have to ask some leading questions. Well, this doesn't seem to bother you too much. Why is that? And you have to ask them in a careful way because they have liability issues, right? So at the end of the day, when I run into something that could be a major liability issue where they just don't know the answer, which happens a lot in inspections because we can't do invasive inspection. You can't damage anything. You can't open walls to inspect. You have to get permission, but most sellers will not give permission for that, okay? Because we cannot do that. There are some issues that you will never have a clear picture on. You will not have an answer, right? Even like mold mediation. There could be mold in the house. You can have positive samples from surface even. Until they open up the walls and the baseboards and floors, they don't know if they're gonna have to replace all the subfloor panels. They don't know how much it's going to cost. So they'll give you this massive range, right? But what I will often say to my home inspector, I know you can't tell me because you don't know the answer, but if you were buying this house and you had children, are you okay with them sleeping there at night? Are you okay with your loved ones, with your animals, with your family being here? Fine. If you bought this house and you had a priority list for what needed to be done, would this be on your top 10? Leading questions like that. They're not always so big where they have to be so leading, but when I can see that they're avoiding me, I will make it easy for them to answer without putting any liability on them. Does that make sense? This is also a good way to get information out of other agents. Many, many times I have my offer accepted because I'm like, I know you can't answer for your sellers, but if this was your home, at what number are you like, I really just have to take that offer. So it's all about the way you ask things, right? It's not asking, you can't ask directly, and you want to have these conversations verbally. Don't have them in writing. People don't want to put things like this in writing, right? So put on your buyer or seller hat, put on both. And I try to be really objective. I am not trying to downplay issues, regardless if I represent the buyer or the seller. I want to know the truth. I want to know the options. I want to know what next steps are if we need more information, whether I represent the seller or the buyer. Okay. So buyer, it's very important that you're at these inspections. So now you've opened your escrow. I used to go to the listing agent and say, hey, listing agent, I'd like to do inspections on this day, around this time. Well, first off, that was opening the door for them to say no, even though they aren't allowed to do that, or their client to. And secondly, it was also me negotiating a time and day when I didn't have the one person I can't replace on board yet, the inspector. So I no longer ask for permission because contractually, I do not have to ask for permission. I have the right. I still get told no sometimes. So I'm really sorry, Kristen, but your buyers can't inspect on Saturday because, my clients are hosting their kid's birthday party. No worries. I'm fine to do that as long as you will give me an extension on my investigation contingency for the amount of days you're delaying. Simple as that. A lot of times, all of a sudden they're like, oops, just kidding, go ahead and inspect. Or they really do have the birthday party and they get that, so they understand that, and so they give me the extension. Totally fine with me. But if you're not going to grant me the access that I'm contractually owed, you're going to give me the extension right then. So I schedule those inspectors and I generally schedule out from my most important. Okay. And how do you know which inspections you need to order? Well, ultimately that is up to your buyer, but I would recommend what I call core inspections always. And they're different for condo and single family. So on a single family, most important, whether it's single family or condo, is going to be your general inspection. Your general inspector looks at everything. Okay, so on a single family, we also want a termite inspection. Sewer inspection. If there is a chimney or fireplace, even if it's advertised as decorative, because what if they find a structural issue? If there is a pool or spa. If the property is on a hillside or major grade, we also want a geological inspection. Yes.
Foundation.
No. So I don't hire, that's what I'd call a secondary inspection. And so when my clients ask me, oh, why aren't we hiring this kind of inspector? Why aren't we having mold? Well, we can, but it costs a lot of money. It's going to make the seller go on the defensive right away. But the reason we don't is because we have a general inspector who's going to test everything. And if anything looks amiss to him, he's going to let us know. There's going to be photos of it. And he's going to tell us, hey, you should have a foundation inspection. You should have a roof inspection. Yeah. And why is time of the essence? Is because we might need those secondary inspections. And I wasn't planning on the time I need to get them set up and have those in. And also, how do I know I will be happy with the inspector's results? Let me give you an example. I represented a buyer recently on a really big purchase, and all the inspectors, termite, general contractor, they were like, this house was in bad shape. It was like, roof needs to be totally replaced. There's a law that you can only have a certain amount of layers on a roof. This roof was past that point. I hire a roof inspector that I have used for a very long time. But he sends out some new kid that I've never seen. And he gives me an estimate for like $20,000. And it's like, it just needs to be repaired here and there. And I'm like, send your boss out. Because here's the thing, I now have to give the sellers this $20,000 estimate, even though I know that that is wrong. He didn't go on the fucking roof. I'm like, how, and what? And this is a 15,000 square foot house, okay? There is no chance that that number is right. Anyways, boss comes out, it's like 120 grand, needs total replacement. This is what I was expecting, like the 1 to 150 range. And it matched everything else every other inspector was telling me. But I called the boss because I wanted them to revise their estimate. I'm not trying to commit fraud. But if I don't like a number or what it says, and I'm doing it because I want the number to be different, that is fraud. If I'm calling another company, and they give me the number I want, I still have to present both of them. Does that make sense? At the end of the day, all I want is honest, accurate information. I need my clients to feel like they know what position they're in. And I need the seller to receive that information as reliable. Yes.
The buyer, you first refer to the buyer because the buyer has to pay for each of these.
The buyer pays for all these inspections, yes.
First, they have to agree if he's not happy with this number. The second one,
It's not about the buyer being happy with this number. I went to the buyer. It's not about the buyer being happy. I went to the buyer and I was like, I don't think this is legit. I don't think the guy like bothered to look. This is way off of what anyone else is telling us. Let me call his boss, who is the person I've been working with for the last 12 years, and see what they have to say about it. But it is not about my buyer being happy with the number. That's fraud. It's about getting accurate information and presenting it accurately. And if I can't get accurate information, I still have to present it, that information I received. So it's very important to have high quality, well-respected, known inspectors. Can your buyer bring in their Uncle Bob contractor? Absolutely. Do you know what the listing agent's gonna think about that? Go fuck yourself. That's what I think about that. Uncle Bob, I'm sure you're completely unbiased. And I'm sure you're an excellent contractor. That's why you've been able to be here for like 7 hours on Tuesday. And you are so knowledgeable. Man, your opinion is way different from every other inspector I have here. Yes.
Regarding the sewer inspection, you're requesting those on every property?
Every single family. It is not, so LA has a really high standard of inspection and sale. Like our service blows everybody else's away, even from the valley. Like you go in the South Bay, I'm like, what do these people get paid for? It is standard practice in the LA area to have a sewer line inspection, yes. What about condos? We'll talk about that in a minute. Yes.
What if you find something like really wrong? Let's say there's branches on the.
I will talk to you about the really wrong
They're
stuff.
really wrong.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah. Yeah, so do your buyer a favor and tell them, your Uncle Bob can come and look, but don't you dare have your Uncle Bob give me a piece of paper. It will not help you. It will only hurt you. And they'll say, but da. Well, I want you to think about it from the listing agent and seller's perspective. This is your relative. This is not someone who actually has the credentials, the licensure, the bonding, right? They're not a qualified, for lack of a better term, home inspector. There are people who train just to do home inspection. And our only ambassador to the seller is going to be the listing agent. So if the listing agent thinks that the person you brought in is unqualified, do you think that they're going to try to, do you think they're going to help your cause? You're not. So by bringing in Uncle Bob, you are shooting yourself in the foot. Uncle Bob can come, he can keep his mouth shut, and I don't want to see anything from Uncle Bob. Only from our professional inspectors that we hire. Uncle Bob is more than welcome to talk with the inspectors, but We don't want any information from him. Did I see another hand somewhere? No. Okay. So qualified inspector, I do it right away on day one. I set inspections. I try to set all of them on the same day and time. That is not always possible. If you get them on the same day and time, you are a little lucky and very good at coordinating.
Can they all be there at the same time? Like, they're not gonna end up in each other's way or?
Actually, they'll call things out. I like to have them there at the same
Okay.
time. They work a little bit better together, a bigger picture. One will be
Okay.
like, I'm a little worried about this. What do you see from down there? Right? Like the termite inspector, they can only see what they can see, right? And they all have different like strengths. When they're there at the same time, they all know each other already anyways, the good ones. They will talk about things and one will mention something, but he'll be like, so your blah, blah, blah inspector is almost done. And he's gonna talk to you more about this and he specializes more in that area. So I'm gonna mention it to you, but I'm gonna let him talk to you about it further because that's his area. So yeah, I like them there at the same time. Secondary inspection is any inspection based upon what they find. So, you know, if there's elevated moisture, the general inspector is gonna say something. If the termite sees water damage, they're gonna say something, right? So they all kind of cover a little bit of each other's areas. On a condo, I don't know. My phone stresses me out. We don't have termite usually, but the buyer should have whatever inspection they want to. Because what does it do? It opens you to liability if you try to persuade them not to have an inspection. But what I say to a buyer on a condo is, I don't typically have a termite inspection because walls out is HOA responsibility. You don't typically have termite infestation on the interior of the unit. It's not unheard of, so if you want to have one, you absolutely can. They generally only cost between $100 and $200, so why not? If there is a fireplace in a condo, I do recommend that they have an inspection, but most of the time, if there is something wrong, they're stacked. If it's a multi-level building, there's not much they can ever do about it. But don't you want to just know if you can safely operate it or not, right? As a buyer, like, should I be operating this while I'm sleeping at night? Or should I be operating it at all? What do I need to know? So on a condo, there is no sewer line for the individual unit. That's again going to be HOA responsibility. So I have general, termite if they want it. I do have chimney, even though I prepare my buyer for the fact that even if there is something wrong, very little, if anything, can usually be done about that. And if there is something to be done, we have to look at the HOA docs, but it's very likely that it could be the HOA responsibility and not the unit owner. Again, anything that's HOA responsibility, if you find something, the seller can't credit you for that. The seller cannot do that work. It's common area, only the HOA management company acting on behalf of the board can make any repair. Yes.
If there's a house with elevator in there, you need to, the general inspectors are not responsible for that.
Oh man, if there's an elevator, you're gonna have an elevator inspection. There will always be weird things like that. Not weird, but there aren't many homes that we see with elevators. John's very fancy. So Meet's got a new listing that's fancy with an elevator. You would have an elevator inspection. I sold a property to a fancy person and I had to have a generator inspection. It took me like a week to even find someone who would look at a generator. I have no idea if that inspector was good or not. It was like the only person after calling 45 people that would inspect a generator. So this property had backup generators. So if zombie apocalypse comes, I know where I'm going and I'd be like, you're alive because I sold you this house and I had that generator inspected. Can I please come in? I brought some beer. In any case, you will have weird things. If you see issues with trees, there's stuff like arbor inspections. You could read the buyer and seller advisory. I mean, is that what we're looking at today?
Yes.
You can look at the buyer and seller advisory. It will talk about all these different types of inspections you could have. There is an environmental specialty and designation within CAR. You can pick a specialty when you renew your license and you can use that one if you want. I hated it. I thought it was going to be easy. It was not. But if you want to just take it to have that designation of being an environmental specializing agent, like environmental hazard specializing agent, you can. But, you know, lead-based paint, asbestos can be in piping. Not all mold is toxic or hurtful. Like asbestos is not hurtful unless it's disturbed, okay? Lead-based paint, again, not hurtful unless it's disturbed or ingested, right? So a lot of people, they hear all this stuff in the media and they're like, oh my God, there's mold, we can't buy this house. And I'm like, wait. We get the results of what kind of mold is in there. We should see, because if it is not a harmful type and something that can be remedied easy, I wouldn't walk away from, you know, a house that you really want over that. So it's dispelling a lot of fear, a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of hype around these things. Sometimes it is bad. Sometimes it's not. And that's why we bring in these specialty inspectors that specialize in it. However, be aware, I've never met a foundation inspector I thought was honest. I've only ever met one inspector I didn't think was full of it. These people who take air samples, no relevance on whether there's mold and what is actually present. You can, if that mold sample is not a surface sample, it has no bearing on anything. None. So to take a surface sample, if we have to scrape something, I have to get permission from the seller, even if it's just a little nip in something. But at that point, most of them want to know, because they're going to have to disclose the fact that there was mold.
When they sell the house as is, or the sale is.
All RPAs say as is. There is no such thing as selling a home as is. A buyer can ask for anything they want, but a seller also has the right to say no or refuse to respond at all. And as is, I mean, do you think as is like, oh, there's a plug stopper missing, there's a tub stopper missing? But what if I find a $200,000 foundation issue that no one knew? Do you think that the seller thinks we're not going to ask for something? And is it binding? It is not binding. And as this purchase is not binding. Every single RPA says that the home is being purchased in as is condition, but it does not prohibit the buyer from inspecting within the investigation time contingency that they have or making any requests that they want. However, it does not prohibit a seller from refusing to even respond, let alone deny. So as is worthless. I don't care what anyone says about as is. It's already in the contract. So you're reiterating something thinking that it's going to have any different meaning? No. Control F if you're a PC, Command F if you are a Mac user, next time you're in the RPA, and type in as is. It says that we're buying in as is condition. It's worthless. But I love these agents who think that it means something. I tell my clients all day long, ignore it, it means nothing. Besides, we're only going to ask for things that are real anyhow. Any buyer that sees these is going to ask for the same things that we're asking for. Because I manage my buyer's expectations. We're not buying new construction. I will get you a tub stopper. You know, like we're not asking the seller for that. Sorry, it's one of my pet peeves. Not at you, just at these agents who say as is. They're idiots. And they're making you think that it means something too. By being so adamant that it does. It means nothing.
What about investment properties, like really distressed homes, where they're like selling it as is, cash only? Can the investor then say like, I have
If the buyer has an investigation contingency, they can still ask, but it doesn't mean that the seller has to do anything. My answer has not changed. Now, if the buyer has no contingencies, they can still look, they can still ask, but they'll still be bound to purchase the property no matter how the seller responds. So I don't see why the buyer would make a request, because what seller on earth is going to agree to give them something when they have a contingency free offer? They're not going to, right? But there are certain types of property where there is no one to make the repair, like probate with court confirmation, that kind of thing, right? Although if it's within a certain range, credits can still happen, just repair can't happen with probate, right? If it's probate with court confirmation. Probate without court confirmation is very much like a standard sale, and you're going to go through all the standard things. So yes, they can say as is. Here's the other thing though. Think about where they're saying as is. So I had a listing that had a fake retaining wall. And there was a mountain that ended in the backyard of the house. My poor sellers had lived there for over 20 years. They had no idea this retaining wall was fake. So they've been living there with zero protection. Whoever put it in, it had permits even. It was permitted as a retaining wall. Whoever put it in was a massive crook. And it was before they bought it. Yeah. So I sold this puppy like 3 times. Eventually, I just told my seller, we have to sell it for the value. I had all the reports because I had sold it 3 times. So I had 3 buyers inspection reports. At this point, I put it all in the MLS in the document section. I put in agent remarks, selling for land value based on these things. Please see attached reports before even bothering to call me. You know, please make sure your buyer's comfortable with them before bothering to call me. It's a great buy. The lender doesn't have to know. They don't. They're not going to find out from me. And if you're not doing any inspections, you're not lying to them about not having inspections. So at that point, would it have helped a buyer to make a request for repair or credit from me? No, because I priced it at lot value, at land value, right? So think about the motivation. But in no circumstance ever, unless the buyer doesn't have an investigation contingency, do they not have the opportunity to ask? They can still ask, even if they didn't, but who would say yes to anything in an unobligated ask? They wouldn't. And think about it this way also, because a seller is required to give any existing inspection report, even if they believe it has 0 merit, it's from Uncle Bob, to any potential future buyer. They are more motivated to close an escrow with me where we are almost done than they are to go back and start over disclosing all these things up front. Unless they have 25 offers and they truly believe your information is not legitimate, right? So if I am the buyer's agent and the listing agent is not there, if anything big comes up, I immediately call them at that time. I'll say, hey, so I just want to talk to you now and give you the opportunity to talk to the inspector while he's still here. He just showed me this and told us this. And I'll put them on speaker. Again, why? Well, my method for operating with investigation, contingency, and inspection negotiation is a spirit of cooperation and transparency. Again, remember, I don't have any shot getting anything from the seller unless the listing agent introduces it to the seller as something that's reasonable, as something that's honest, as something that they should probably consider giving to a buyer, right? So I give them the reports the moment I have them. By the way, contractually, you're obligated to do so. A lot of agents wait until they make the request or until they don't make the request until at 5 p.m. the last day, and then they give the reports. Those high pressure old school sales tactics, they don't work. They don't work. And we'll talk about why in a second. But I'll call the inspector, I'll have the listing agent talk with them. If the listing agent is not being super receptive or doesn't know my inspector, I will actually collaborate with the other agent and we'll throw out names until we find an inspector that we both think is credible and both like. And we will invite a second opinion in. Because I am operating in from an honest platform, I do not discourage a second opinion. Great. Let's get to the bottom of it. And if they're accurate, they should all be pretty close. You may get inaccuracies and look out for shady agents that are pretending to cooperate with you but aren't. You see massive differences in numbers on estimates. Look at the scope of work. Call the inspectors, check that it's the same, and if worse comes to worse, stick them on the fucking phone together and let them talk about it because they're not going to put their license on the line and deny it when that happens. Okay, so if you see major discrepancies, check what they're actually quoting, right? I had a buyer once who something needed a minor repair, and he insisted that his inspectors just give quotes for total replacement. And I said, all right, but if the listing agent reads this, they're probably going to say no to everything because they know that you're not asking for something that's fair. But okay. They went ahead and got a second inspection. That inspector gave an estimate for what was necessary and what was upgraded and made a clear delineation. It pissed the buyer off. And they're like, don't send that one to the listing agent. I was like, I'm sorry, I have to send both. I don't have the option. And I'm not going to lose my license. I'm not going to compromise my morals or my ethics over you trying to get a larger credit. It's possible that if you ask for total replacement, you will get it. But I'm not going to say this is what the cost of the repair is. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything at all. In fact, it's better that I pretend to be lazy in this instance and let them look at the estimates and just make whatever assumptions, and I'll answer the questions if I have to, right? So any numbers you get, anything you have to give. Inviting a second opinion when you're being honest should not be a scary thing. There could be discrepancies. Find out what the discrepancies are. Sometimes, like I said, there are those unknown variables, and you're not going to know. That's just a lot of negotiation back and forth trying to resolve that about comfort levels between buyer and seller. There's a lot of negotiation going on between the listing agent and the buyer's agent at that point. You know, there's just a little leap of faith on both sides, generally speaking, in that kind of instance. All right, so got all the reports. If there was anything big, I invited the listing agent to hear information directly. I invited them to collaborate with me on getting a second opinion, because I need that listing agent to tell the seller, this is real, these numbers are real, and it's reasonable, because that is the only shot I have of getting my buyer anything that they want. Okay. A lot of agents come from this camp of not doing their job. And the listing agent will just tell the seller, just split the request down the middle. If they're requesting 20, give them 10. I'm sorry, what are you getting paid for? Again, you need to read the inspection reports. You need to find the discrepancies, like the buyer who is giving us getting estimates for total replacement when the inspection report said it just needed repair. As the agent, you should be the listing agent. You should be catching these things, right? As a buyer's agent, you need to understand. It's very frustrating for me. I understand quite a bit about home improvements, and yet I'm still incapable of actually applying it to my own home. But I do know when someone is taking me for a ride now. I'm like on speed dial to my general inspector. I'm like, Chris, is this legit? And he's like, no, get out of your house. Thank you. Yes. Oh, not a question. No, sorry. It's okay. All right. So now that I am buyer's agent, now that I have all the information I need, now that I'm ready, now that I've talked to my buyer, I've coached my buyer on what is reasonable, what is not. Ultimately, they are still my boss. I still ask for whatever they want. I use the request for repair form, but I generally have started having a verbal conversation with the listing agent. Hey, so far, this is what's really like concerning to my buyers. We start talking to your sellers about, how they feel about this. Do we need to have a third opinion? I'm just inviting them to collaborate with me. Right? I'm not inviting them to do anything shady. I'm not doing anything shady. I'm just telling them, giving them the heads up of what to expect so they can start working on their sellers. Because even if all the information is honest and accurate and they believe it to be so, no seller likes to see a $25,000 request for repair. Even if it's completely legitimate, you're going to have a negative response. Because who wants to pay 25 grand or receive 25 grand plus? Nobody. So when I have that verbal pre-negotiation, or not even negotiation, just set up, that listing agent, if they're any decent at their job, is starting to have these conversations with their seller. This is what the buyer's agent is telling me. This is what they think is important. Let's take a closer look at this. Do you have anyone else you want to bring in? It gives that listing agent sometimes the time to get a reluctant seller to hire even a third party or their own second opinion to bring in so that they can make an informed decision instead of saying no, right? So as a listing agent, you are sometimes ordering inspections as well. If your seller is questioning it, one of your resources is, well, should you want to hire someone else to take another look at it?
Pays for it.
If it's a seller inspection, seller pays for it.
Who said it?
Yeah. All right, so I've set this up. Now it's time to make my formal request. I use the RR form, RR1, and I tell the seller what my buyer wants. and I support it. And I attach copies of all the inspection reports, even though I've already given them to the listing agent when I receive them. And I am generally formulating a verbal, like a written email argument with it too. I am rationalizing why the seller should give us this, or why we're asking for this, but not this, or reminding them, you know what? We are not asking for the total roof replacement. We could see it was in bad condition when we made the offer, but we did not anticipate this foundation issue or the, you know, mold issue in the guest house. So, you know, we're trying to be reasonable here. We know the mold can be crazy. You know, we've decided to split it down the middle. We're not going on the high end, but we're certainly not going to ask, you know, we're certainly not going to be satisfied with the minimum range end of the estimate for mold mediation. You know, I am establishing why and what we're doing. You need to be respectful, you need to be kind, you need to have a well-prepared argument, like a true persuasive essay, right? Hopefully it's not essay length, but you'll be in inspection negotiations that are, don't worry. So you're supporting it and you're doing it as soon as you're able to. You are not waiting until the investigation contingency expires. You're not giving it to them at 5 p.m. on the last day unless in order to gather all the information you needed to, you had to do that, okay? You're just not doing that. If you need more time, ask for an extension and tell them why. Tell the listing agent why. They should know. And this is also a great way to get an extension, is when you collaborate with them on who to bring in for the second opinion. They know they're not available. They're going to get you the extension necessary. Because they know you're not messing around. They know what you're telling them is the truth. And they would prefer to have someone they trust in there as well to resolve a big issue. Generally speaking, in exchange, you know, here's my request for repair seller. In exchange, I'm doing something. I'm lifting at least the investigation contingency. But around the time that you wrap up the investigation contingency is around times you'd be able to lift other contingencies as well. So as many contingencies as I can safely lift, I offer to lift in exchange for the seller agreeing to my request for repair. I really, when I start to get nasty repairs, I preemptively pick up the phone and I talk to my buyer's loan professional. I'm like, hey, someone have this massive request for repair. How quickly can I have formal loan approval? Because I would very much like to say, seller, just sign it. It's a done deal if you do. Seller is much more likely to give you a little bit more if that is the last thing that is negotiated and they're guaranteed to close, or at least the buyer's deposit in the case of failure to close after they left all the contingencies, right? I'm offering something. You're frustrated with us. You want to be rid of us. Be done with us. Just sign this. Just grant our request, and we will lift all of our contingencies. So as many contingencies as I can lift, I'm holding to lift and very happy to lift at the time of my request for repair. Now, I'm not looking for a request for repair, right? There's not always a request for repair. Most of the time there is, but that's because there's generally something wrong with the house. Sometimes a request for repair is such bullshit, but even if I'm representing the seller, I'll just be like, just give them $1,000.
Yeah.
I'll go back to the buyer's agent. I'll just be like, take your fucking $1,000 that you guys don't deserve from your made up numbers. Sign the contingency removal and let's close, or please let me cancel. Doing this is a good sign of faith because I know your buyers probably just need to feel like they've won something, clearly, because there's nothing legitimate here. I mean, I got some like $15,000 request for repair on a house where there was a leak under the kitchen sink, and that I was there for all the inspections, and that was the only thing that was there. So when I got that, I called up the buyer's agent and I was like, I'm sorry, was there an inspection that took place that I was unaware of? Because I was there the entire time. I heard everything that every inspector said that you did. I have all the same inspection reports you do. I'm like, is there a massive problem with the plumbing? If so, why don't you didn't schedule an appointment to have a plumber come out and give an estimate. Where are you coming up with this number? I don't have time for that. I can now. It's like, no, I have 6 backup offers. You're not getting any more time and no more, you don't ask me for $15,000 on a nearly perfect house. I was like, I can absolutely convince my sellers to give you $1,000. You tell me right now if your buyers are okay with that. Otherwise, please just send me cancellation. Because it was so made up. It's such bullshit. I'm not doing that. Even if there were issues in the house, how are you coming at me with any number? Unless you got an estimate, and if you got an estimate, why wasn't that given to me? Right? Yes,
Should you inform the owner about all this request anyway?
100%.
Yeah.
You are required to, you are legally required to provide them with this request and all the documents. And it is ultimately up to them how you respond, but most of them listen to your advice in this situation, at least, as far as, how you should proceed with negotiation. But if you've done all of this stuff right and invited people to collaborate, generally speaking, it's pretty easy. Inspection negotiations are either hard and deal breaking, or they're generally pretty easy. And that has everything to do with how you have conducted yourself and the kind of relationship you've had with the other agent throughout this process. Some will refuse to engage with you. You can't help that one.
What does your prep talk with the seller sound like as far as prepping them mentally for all these requests for repairs?
Well, it depends on what the situation's like. Do I believe like the other agent is being forthcoming and honest? Do I feel like they're having the normal inspections and not hiring 20 inspectors at the get-go? Like, are they bringing secondary inspectors in at the beginning? Or are they waiting until we pick their inspections? So if I see an excessive amount of inspections being set up with no indication as to why, I'm a good agent, so I'm physically present. Yes, I will say, seller, I need you to get prepared. I believe that the buyer is trying to concoct a large credit request.
But I mean, like, before you even bring it to market, when you're preparing the seller for the listing,
Yeah.
do you say like, hey, you may get like up to 50 grand or more or less?
I don't say you may, I say, I think that this is a big problem, so we should get it checked out before we consider going to market. Yeah, were you here at the beginning, Wes?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I, as an agent, see anything that stands out to me, I 100%, I'm like, seller, we really need to get that looked at, because it could be an issue, it could not. But if we find out in escrow, we find out through the buyer's representative, who may or may not be giving us honest or accurate information. And we subsequently have to give that information to any other buyer, even if we don't believe this buyer is being honest. So let's address it up front. Let's find out what's going on. Let's find out if it's something that's going to prevent you from being able to make the sale. What if it's a repair so large they don't have enough equity in their house to actually sell the house? Or what if it is a big repair, but their Uncle Bob is actually a foundation contractor to get their permits and they can do the repair legitimately, right? So it's, I don't look to fix every little thing, okay? I mean, spruce things up, sure. I'm not looking to hide anything, but if I see anything that I think is problematic, I am always like, seller, we should get this checked out and know what we're dealing with before we bother to try to go on market. If nothing else, I can better protect your purchase price with it. So yeah, 100%. I am preparing my seller before we go to market.
Yes. Recommend the seller doing inspection, if they have lived in the house for a long time, or hasn't lived in the house, maybe there was somebody else, he just moved into the house.
A pre-listing inspection. So here's the problem with the pre-listing inspection. It over discloses things that wouldn't necessarily be an issue. What do I mean by that? Well, you have to give that inspection report to any prospective buyer, yeah? And all of a sudden, a buyer is seeing, oh, the tub stopper is missing. It's on the report. It's reasonable for me to ask for that. You don't know that their buyer's agent is actually setting them up for it. They're seeing that written report with hire a licensed contractor, not the in-person report where the in-person inspection where they're like, well, I would get a $2 washer from Lowe's and install this here like this, right? So just like I don't send a CMA or a price opinion over to a client unless I can, at a minimum, have them on the phone or be in person. Because what they see may be very different than what they accept. Give them the opportunity to see what, and explain what you're discussing with them in person, right? To give them the accurate perspective. So no, I would not do a pre-listing inspection. Yeah, I would, however, do the pre-listing. I'm talking about general inspection, John. I would do the pre-listing inspection on an item that I thought was problematic. Like if I see a ton of wood rot, if I see a lot of like foundation movement, cracking and pavement, things like that, I will have those things absolutely looked at. You know, if I see that the roof, like if the seller tells me, oh yeah, it's leaking in this room, leaking in that room, leaking here, I'm like, let's get an estimate for roof repair. Let's see if it needs to be completely replaced or, you know, we can, maybe if it's, you know, a couple $1,000, we just get it repaired before we go to market. Yes.
That, you said if it's like, you know, some major stuff, you know, too much credit may be suspicious to the lender, no? Like, if you
Why
ask
would the
them too
lender
much
have
credit,
any information on this?
They won't have any information, right?
They, well, we're not there to actually successfully having your request accepted. But the lender has a lot to do with how much of a credit a buyer can receive.
That's what I'm saying.
But no, we have a way of hiding
Oh,
the
hiding it.
reason
Oh,
for the credit from them,
got it.
which I will share with you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there a, any inspectors that you suggest that we use? Like a list of inspectors that we can maybe?
Yeah,
look
so,
up
email me.
and- Okay.
I'm not gonna go through and I'm gonna make sure, I'm pretty honest and outspoken. The office is always a big fan of me not endorsing people they like me to. I'm still not gonna do what they told me to, but I'm gonna do it in private.
Okay, so we need one, we can just.
Just
you.
email me, yeah, just
Just we need
email
an
me.
inspector, okay.
I'm still gonna do what I want, but I'm not gonna do it on recording.
Yeah.
I'm so okay talking about it too.
There we go.
Sure.
Because legally, your brokerage is not allowed to try to influence who you use for anything, by the way.
Really?
Do they? Absolutely, all of them do. Yeah. And I encourage you to form relationships with people that you think are a reflection of yourself in the business or bring strengths to areas you're weaker in that make you a better agent. Not because someone told you, not because you have built-in allegiance to them. Someone who you want to work with. Who would you want to hire for your own inspection? It's not just about someone who's going to catch every little thing wrong, but someone who's going to be a problem solver and be resourceful, because there's going to be something wrong with everyone else. Right? All right, so when you make your request to repair, we already talked about the layout, you can ask for one of three things, 2 of 3 things, or 3 of 3 things. Those would be credit, repair, price reduction, any combination thereof. Let's talk about credit really quick. A lender limits how much a credit, how large of a credit a buyer can receive from a seller. Typically limited to the cost of what are called non-recurring. There are 2 types, not that, please mute.
Sure.
There are 2 types of closing costs, recurring and non-recurring. What does recurring mean?
It's every
It
time.
happens more than once. Non-recurring happens once.
Yeah.
Right? What happens once in a purchase? And that's going to be a type. Yep. Insurance, taxes, those are all recurring closing costs. Now, there can be an exception. It is not up to us. It is up to the buyer's lender. Okay. Closing costs are typically in relation to the sales price of the property. So if you are trying to maximize out a buyer credit, but you successfully negotiate too large of a credit, ooh, bad job, you, right? Good problem to have. And you decide to apply some of it to purchase price reduction. So let's say I negotiate a $45,000 request for repair. Lender tells me you can have $25,000 in credits. So I say to the other agent, we'll just reduce the purchase price by the other 20. Well, that's actually going to slightly reduce my non-recurring closing costs because they're based on the sales price. Not a huge, massive amount. I would just be conscious of the fact that if you're pushing it to the max, be on the safer side and give a little cushion, take a little less credit and apply a little bit more purchase price reduction if you're really on that line where you're maximizing that credit. If you're going over the credit allowance by the buyer's lender, don't say, oh, okay, 25 and 20. 23, 22, like give yourself a little room there. Because if push comes to shove at funding and the lender's like, oh no, we can't do this credit because we don't allow it, you're just gonna close and your buyer's not gonna get that full amount. That's why you're giving a little cushion there. That happened many times, not with my buyer. The seller's like, woo, and I'm like, yeah, woo. Ineptitude at its finest, go us. So just be conscious of that. So what I do, you cannot do this with a loan officer. Okay, so if you're another reason, just a buyer should not be working with a loan officer directly. Unless they have private banking relationship, and in that case, you can tell them anything, they don't care anyway. If they have a mortgage broker, you can tell them anything you want. I don't know if they're supposed to hear that stuff and it's not say anything. Not answering on camera, smart.
Kristen, I have a question.
Yeah,
Is it better to go 100% towards the reduction of the price?
no, there's no better, it's preference. So if the buyer gets a credit, they have to come in with less cash, which often leaves them for more cash to remodel, improve, furnish. Okay, but a purchase price reduction in perpetuity is going to lower their property taxes, right? It's going to lower closing costs a little bit. So it's really a matter of preference. The seller doesn't usually care. The seller, I guess, could care because if it's a purchase price reduction, their neighbors might be pissed off with them. Because what does that comp do to the neighbors' home prices? It lowers it, except for when you're their listing agent, because you called all the agents involved in those comps and you know why that price is lower than the rest. Because I taught you to. But you're still gonna have to go out of your way to educate the other agents. And then repair. Sometimes a repair is just like, it's just something so vital. The buyer needs to move in, so they just want the seller to make the repair. Like some broken windows. Seller just make the repair on that because I'm gonna be moving in boxes. I don't wanna deal with the broken windows. I need my house to be secure when my stuff goes in there, right? Maybe they have young kids, whatever it is, there might be a reason that your buyer wants the seller to make the repair. Yes.
Do you always trust that the
No,
seller and
no.
listing agent are gonna do
No.
the work in the quality that you're gonna?
No, I do not. Yeah. So I strongly discourage my buyer. I strongly discourage my buyer from having the repairs done by the seller. The reason for that is because we don't know that they're going to have them done properly. We don't know that they're going to take as much care with it. Even if they do believe they're doing it properly, we know that not all contractors are created equal. So if my buyer really wants a repair, even though I've told them this, and there may be a very valid reason for it, and it's not even up to me. It doesn't matter what their reason is. If that's what they want, that's what they want. My recommendation is that I stipulate, seller, you are to repair this item using this company. And provide, a receipt with a written scope of the work on it. With the 5 days prior to close of escrow. Put a deadline on it too.
But if you supervise, let's say that there is a more problem before you close the deal, and the seller say, I'm gonna fix it up, but I'm gonna be.
No, there's no, I'm gonna fix it. It's a request for repair. It's a binding contract.
Oh.
And that's why you have a due date on it. Yeah. Because guess what? A buyer can issue a seller notice to perform too. Seller doesn't give you disclosures, you can issue them a notice form. Probably not a good way to start off your escrow if you want to get through to the end and focus on the more important parts. I have actually had this happen where the seller didn't make a repair. The listing agent was lying to me about it. They were blocking our final walkthrough, and I had a feeling it had something to do with not doing the repairs. And I literally said to the listing agent, "You have seen this repaired with your own eyes." Yes. I was like, I bluffed, and I was like, we're not gonna fund this fucking loan. We're not doing anything until we get in there. Something's not right. They finally let us in, like late in the day before we should be funding. Sure enough, it's not done. So I call our lender, I'm like, we're not funding. He's like, Kristen, their rate lock expires tomorrow. They have to fund tomorrow, or it's gonna cost them a lot more money. I told the buyers, I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? I'm like, we can just close it. We can just fund it anyway. Let's see if they buy it. They did, and we got a really large credit. But I'm just saying this because where did I get myself in trouble? I didn't put a deadline on that repair. Okay, so stipulate who, how, and by when if it's going to be a repair. Licensed contractor, or name that contractor. Right, to get the seller to agree to it, they probably have to have an estimate from that specific person they're asking to have the work repaired. then why? Yes.
In a situation like that one, when the seller hasn't completed the repairs and your buyer's rate is gonna expire, which is gonna cost them more money, can you then turn around and ask the listing agent, hey, look, you're gonna cost my client another $1,000, $1,500, I want you to. give us
Yeah.
additional credit."
Yeah, you can ask them to pay for the rate lock extension. You can ask them to pay for credit. You know, maybe your buyer's like, fine, just give us the credit. Yeah, you typically work it out. I mean, at that point, most sellers are packing to move. So if they're not motivated to work with you in that instance, probably don't want to complete the sale. Bigger problems. All right, so your request for repair, congratulations, you have successfully negotiated your request for repair. Probably not. You're probably gonna get a response on it. That's for a minor repair. It's at the bottom of the request for repair where seller can make a small modification. If they're gonna make a large modification, they would respond on the RRRR, seller response to buyer request for repair. I strongly discourage you from going through rounds and rounds of these documents. Every round, your success rate of having any chance of closing this deal goes down significantly. If you're not very successfully verbally negotiating this with the other agent and being received well, and yet you continue to do these written requests, chances are you're gonna see a cancellation, not any kind of negotiation. So, you know, and I've said this to my buyers before. Look, if we go past this round, chances of us getting it together are like slim to none. So if there are more things that you're willing to concede on or want me to feel the other agent out on, let's talk about that now. And go ahead and sleep on it. We don't have to decide now if we have time, you know? So you'll either get an acceptance, you'll get a small modified response on the bottom of that document, or you'll get a seller response for buyer's request for repair. There may be further negotiation. You have the option of the buyer completely saying, ditch my first request, I'm making a new one. Sometimes you do that purposefully to make it clean because things got sloppy and you're back and forth. Right, so once we have this negotiated, if there are any financial implications, if there's a credit or a price reduction, we must tell the lender and escrow. However, we do not want them to know what it is for. Because if they think that there is a credit or a reduction of purchase price in lieu of a repair, that gets them all upset. They want to see that their investment is solid. They may come in and say, no, we want this repaired before we'll even issue loan documents. Well, maybe the buyer would prefer the credit because they're not planning on repairing that at all. They're planning on knocking that wall out and expanding. Or maybe it's termite work, it needs to be fumigated. I'm sorry, the seller's not planning on moving out for 3 days, a week before they plan on moving out forever. I had a buyer send a termite report to their lender once where I represented both sides. They had a blind child. And basically the lender's like, yeah, so we're not gonna do the loan unless you do the fumigation. So here my sellers have to find an Airbnb, take their special needs child out of the house for 3 days. And nobody wanted this. Nobody wanted this. The buyer didn't want this. The seller didn't want this, but this was the only way that the buyer was going to get the loan. This is why we hide it. We're not hiding it to hide it. It's just because the bank, the underwriter, somebody will get some notion that something should happen a certain way. And you know what? That's not always in the best interest or meeting the wants of your clients. As long as the clients are in agreement and you're not committing fraud in any way, you are fine. Now, if a lender or an appraiser picks the phone up and called you and asked you why there was such a massive credit and you lied, you have liability there. And I have had that happen. You know what I said? I can't quite remember all the little things. I'm driving right now. Let me call you back later. All of that was true, but I did not ever call that guy back. So what do? We have the request for repair, but we never show that document to escrow on the lender. We draft a modification of terms. Reflecting the credit and or price reduction. We don't say why, we simply say what is. And that's what we send to escrow and the lender. And it is very important that you do not forget to send that to both the escrow company and the lender. Don't send it to escrow expecting them to send it to the lender. They should, but set yourself up for success. Your loan will not fund, your deal will not close on time if you don't have the financial information to the right parties. So don't be lazy, put one more email address in the send section. You've lifted as many contingencies as you can in relation to this. By the way, the contingency removal form says what it's attached to. So be very careful. You're offering, you must offer investigation contingency removal, at least the physical portion of it, in lieu or in exchange for the seller agreeing to your cost for repair. But you don't have to offer anything else. But like I said, you want to offer as many contingencies as possible to give the seller more motivation to agree to your request. And it is so, so important at the top of most documents, that all documents that modify. It says that this document is issued in relation to or accordance with, and it will a lot of times boilerplate say the residential purchase agreement. No, no, no. Your contingency removal is attached to your request for repair. Because if you send that over and you don't change the top or have the top listed correctly, you've just lifted contingencies for nothing. You've just given them the contingency removal. It's not in lieu of anything because you're just lifting contingencies. If this contingency removal is attached to the request for repair, it says on the request for repair that the attached contingency removal is subject to the seller's acceptance of the buyer's terms. You guys want to see it? I'm glad that I see scary looks. I'm very glad that I see scary looks. Email. Love it when someone connects me with someone who's one of my best friends. Saw that email, I'm like, okay. Here's a contingency. You do a screen share for those of you at home. Alright. So this is contingency removal. You can have more than one because you have multiple contingencies. They have different deadlines, right? Let's say this is full contingency removal, however, or you know what, any contingency removal in relation with the response and reply to request for repair. Do you see? It says that in accordance with the terms and conditions of the purchase agreement, that's boilerplate. But in our instance, when we're lifting a contingency in exchange for the seller's agreement to our terms, we're checking this box. This is the box that is super important. That one right there. We're identifying the response and reply to request for repair. Or request for repair. Can be either one of those because you have both of those involved in that situation, right? So it's going to be one of these two documents.
Why not both?
Because you can only get acceptance on one of them. If you have the other, it's a counter, basically, to the other. Yeah. So yeah, if you're ever lifting any contingency in relation to the request for repair, only this box or this box should ever be checked. If you do not check one of these boxes or this box and enter something here, you have just lifted your buyer's contingencies accidentally. And you have no recourse. And the other agent may not catch it, but they may. And that has taken away all protection and negotiation power your buyer has for this negotiation. So print out a contingency removal form and highlight the shit out of these two options and just keep it around. Seriously, I've seen people do it. So just be careful, nothing else. Same thing like on the RPA, when the seller is countering, there's a place to say that the seller accepts and based subject to the attached counter offer. I've seen people forget to, I've seen agents forget to check that box. I've seen agents set it up for their clients to check that box. Don't rely on your client to check that box. As the agent, check that box for them before you ever have them sign that offer, right? Like, There are only a couple of boxes like that in all of real estate. This is one of them. The other is seller counter off. All right, any questions?
Wow.
Kristen, by the way, your sellers are very well known.
I think you're saying something nice.
It is nice.
I'm going,
Ella, I clearly can't hear you, but I appreciate the sentiment. Thank you.
they should very influential.
I have a question.
Yes.
You may have gone over this, I apologize, but when do you want to ask for credit versus a price reduction?
It is going to be at the preference of your buyer. So it probably depends on the dollar amount, but it depends on, do they want, like, if it's credit, they don't have to bring as much cash in for their closing costs. Does that make sense? So they're gonna end up more liquid after. If it's a purchase price reduction, they still have to cover almost the same amount of closing costs. Not much is affected, but their property taxes will be lower in perpetuity because property taxes are based on sales price, things like that. So you have to discuss it with them and it's ultimately their choice. Sometimes they won't really have a choice. It might have to be a combination because you've done such a great job. You can't even get all that credit unless you apply some of it as a price reduction. I wish you all that problem many, many times. All right, any more questions, guys?
Thank you, Christine.
You're welcome. Go get them, Tigers. Remember, kill them with kindness, collaborate. You can't win if they don't trust you or believe you. And you're not trying to deceive them. You're just trying to get what's theirs.